What's going on, and welcome to the Stick Drift Podcast, a podcast for all things cars, racing games, motorsports, and more. Welcome. This may indeed be your first time ever listening to or watching the Stick Drift Podcast. Now, what is this podcast normally? Again, before you skip over to the Scotto interview section, what is this podcast normally? Well, it's a podcast for all things cars, car culture, racing games, and motorsports. A regular episode, you'll find we start with the little bits of news. We rapid fire some of the bits of news that have come out with car cancellations, new car reveals, like new Bugattis, new Nissans, new Ferraris, just anything new in the world of cars. We talk about that for a bit, then we talk about one bigger topic. Or sometimes it'll be two bigger topics if there's not a lot of little news. We'll talk about one bigger topic. One thing like a GTA 6 trailer. Or something like a much bigger cancellation, like the Aventador or something like that. Then we'll do or bigger news, like the whole Cybertruck fiasco when all the stuff for that started coming out and it was all terrible. Then we go into the gaming segment where we talk about Forza, The Crew, Need for Speed, Gran Turismo, CarX, even just anything in racing games, if there's anything big going on. And Test Drive, of course. And then finally, when motorsports are going on, because F1's obviously shut down right now, we hop into the Motorsports segment where we talk about everything going on in the world of motorsports. But that kind of is only really focused on MotoGP and F1, and those are currently not running. So those will be back in the new year, and I'm normally joined by my co-host, Josh. He knows a lot more about cars than I do. He knows definitely a lot more about cars than I do. So it's a good little back and forth, because I've made a career about cars, but I don't know much about them, and he doesn't have a career on cars, but knows way more about them. So it's an enjoyable back and forth. So if you want to check out other episodes of the Stick Drift Podcast, it'll be appreciated. Also, news-wise, next episode of the Stick Drift Podcast will probably be, I want to say, regular time next week. I'm not going to do a Wednesday episode. I'll probably just do a regular, again, back to some time from Saturday to Monday kind of episode. But we got a lot of information to talk about. We didn't talk about the Crew 1 getting shut down last week. We didn't talk about this big story where a concept car got stolen and trashed. It got, chucked in a river or something like that. It was a stolen, I forget what it was, but it was a stolen concept car of some kind of SUV. An Audi vs. Lancia movie that is coming out within a month that they only just dropped a trailer for. And then, of course, like I mentioned, car cancellations. One of the biggest car cancellations to happen recently, the Camaro. The Camaro's been cancelled. We're looking at a big episode. We're looking at a big episode for the next episode of the Stick Drift Podcast. So, subscribe here on the YouTube channel, or subscribe or follow here on the Spotify. Whichever one you're listening to this on, whichever one you listen to podcasts on. And honestly, again, I've talked about this before. I just kind of like the podcast. I'm definitely going to keep it going. It's something that I want to keep going. You know, it's something that it has some meaning to me. You know, it's something that isn't just playing the Crew or trying to play another game or whatever. And I've got big plans for the podcast, but those are in a large part pipe dreams, you know, that it's like, it would be cool if eventually the podcast could be this, but can't get to that point if there's not a base to stand on. So, it'll be very much appreciated. Subscribe, follow, and whatnot. And what an opportunity. What an opportunity to talk to Scotto of Hoonigan. What an insane opportunity to get to be able to talk to someone of that high up in the car world this early on a podcast this small, for one, but also thanks to my main channel, thanks to the channel that I built over the last 3 years. Thanks to that, I can now do this stuff like this. And even still, it feels like, someone with 80k is getting to talk to Scotto? That's still crazy to me. But yes, I got to talk to Scotto. And a video with Scotto is this one, and on the main channel. But the main channel one's just, clips, snippets, if you will. This video right here is just the full interview. So I will see you boys in the next episode of the Stick Drift podcast. I'm going to send you over to the interview. Like I said, check it out. If you're already a listener, big up you. Shout out you. We'll see you boys. We'll see you boys in the next one. Over to Scotto.
All right, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to talk to you. It's an honor to meet you.
Oh, thanks, man.
Through this, of course. I've been
Where are you based?
UK.
Oh, nice.
In like the middle-ish of the UK. Like
Where's the middle-ish?
Buckinghamshire, not too middle, but near Red Bull, actually, near the Red Bull HQ.
Okay, yeah. I was about to say like the UK is like the Midlands, like that whole area is just known for motorsport because like everyone builds cars in like some random shed in some small town. And you're like, what's that? You're like, oh, that's McLaren. You're like, oh, crazy.
Trust me. I've been going to car meets recently, like a bunch of like Santa Pod stuff like that. Going to that
Santa Pod, I've been there and raced there before. It's fun.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like the one drag strip in. We actually forget. I think we did a Gymkhana grid at Santa Pod. I forget now. Such a blur.
I saw the rocket car went down the drag strip, but it was a Jap show. There's some insane cars, and then there's the rattiest hatchback, just carbon everywhere, and like the most wish bought customizations to it. Goodwood as well. Went to Goodwood. There was.
I was at Goodwood this year.
Oh,
Goodwood's a great time.
Yeah,
I was there this year. I've been there a couple times, but it's one of the best motoring events in the world. I mean, your ability to get that close to like amazing cars and also just see like, you know, Formula One drivers like walking around the paddock area. It's such a unique experience. Such a cool one.
I used to think about moving from the UK as I got older, but then now my job's in racing games and cars and everything. I'm so much more like, there's so much that goes on here as far as cars and car culture and all the tracks that we have, obviously Silverstone as well. Like,
yep.
There's a lot that goes on. It's pretty all right being UK based at the moment.
Yeah. No, for a small island, you do a lot in racing.
Right. Yeah. But how are you doing though, man?
I'm good.
Doing recently.
Things have been really good. So it's just been we just released Electricana 2.
I saw that. I watched that.
Which was a week ago, which was great. I mean, obviously, you know, it was a difficult film to put together, you know, after Ken passed, but I'm happy that we were able to like have that like one more film kind of thing.
It's amazing that was in the bank. It's great that was filmed and was able to be released.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people that's what they were most excited to connect to on it, right? Was like it was the film you weren't expecting, you weren't promised, and you know there was this one extra thing, and which was something nice to be able to like not only give the audience but also like to have that one last project with him was really fun. Yeah, so it was cool, and it was something that we filmed a year ago. Normally we would film those things and within a few months it's out.
Yeah.
Right. So like usually it's like a 3-month process from like the time we film it to like when it actually gets uploaded to YouTube. And this sat for like it sat for 6 months. None of us even touched it after Ken passed away. And then we kind of got back into it and got it out. So it felt really good to just like, to just get it out into the ether, and like even just to let people know it was there. Because we're like sitting on secret for months, and you're like doing interviews and people are like, man, it sucks, I'm never going to see another Gymkhana film. And I'm like, well, I might see one.
Exactly.
It might be one more. So, but but that's been good. And I've actually had a bit more time recently to like work on some of my own cars and do some more driving and do some more track days myself. So that's always nice. Yeah. So yeah.
I think it's very beautiful that was able to be made. Then and it made something that was very sudden. It made it a bit more easing out rather than the as sudden as it was when it happened, of course. Instead you get this more grand easing it out, of course. You mentioned your own cars. I mean, being someone who does so much on Motorfest, I know of the Audi and the Porsche and I mean, what else are you cooking? What other kind of work are you doing on those and more?
Well, so I currently own 24 or 25 cars. But like most of them are, you know, like project cars that are in like very much a
Yeah.
project state. These two are actually the cars I've owned the longest. So the Audi I bought in 2004 when I got like my first like real
Wow.
career job.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was like my first real career job. I started working for a magazine, which is Rides magazine, and I bought that like as a present to myself. I drove it for 1 year, started to take it apart, and then it was apart for 17 years and just sat. And then I started working on it again. So like now it's at this point where like it's almost like ready to like hit the track. So it is a long-term patience project. I mean, it's been 20 years now of working on that. And then the 911 was like that childhood dream car. It was like the car I always wanted.
Yeah.
And right when I joined, right when like Ken and I started Hoonigan, I bought that. So like that car was very much the car that we launched Hoonigan the brand on. You know, that car was very much a part of like early Hoonigan, will always be really important to the brand. And I would say that like if I was like my top favorite cars, I mean, I haven't got to actually drive the Audi at Anger since it now has, you know, 850 horse and everything else. But those would probably be like in my top three, with the 911 being always number one. So it's like
Yeah.
it's definitely the two cars that are most important to me. So it was fun because yesterday I got to actually like sit and play with the coupe and game, and everybody was snapping on me and making fun of me, like, "Oh, you finally get to drive your car," and I'm like, "Yeah, all right." So,
Yeah,
but
so
yeah,
I mean, those two cars specifically as well. They feature in a mock this versus that style event too, which is
yeah,
definitely obviously levels are one thing, but there's Gymkhana and there's also this versus that, which are two big things Hoonigan are known for. And
yeah.
out of the this versus that there are, I don't know if you'd be able to, but what would you consider one of your favorite ones that you've done of this versus that?
Um,
Which you can explain
hmm.
just a quick summary on the series, what
Yeah,
you think as well, I suppose.
yeah. So I mean, right. I mean, this versus that for us was like this really basic idea. None of us are drag racers, right? And, like the sport of drag racing is like very nuanced, and there's a lot of rules to it. And we just like watching like cars go head to head, like
Yeah.
cars that shouldn't go head to head. And like, if you think most drag racing is like this versus this, right? It's like the
Mm.
same. It's almost identical cars,
Yeah.
and it's all about like who. It's, you know, you're talking a game of tense, right? Where we really liked this idea of putting things up against each other that you just would never expect, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't expect to see, you know, in no normal world would a monster truck race this, or, you know, or do all these different things. And that's where the concept really grew out of. So some of my favorite, I mean, one of the most like ridiculous races was Leah Block, Ken's daughter, raced the Hoonicorn against like a 4,000 horsepower like pro street drag car.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because all the math would tell you that that car should win, but that car is meant to race on a prep surface, which is basically like glue, right, on
Yeah.
tarmac, and it needs all these conditions to be perfect for it to run. Like I think it runs like a 4 second or five, you know, I think it's like a 4 second pass or something. It's incredibly fast, right?
Yeah.
It should be more than twice as fast as the Hoonicorn, but in that setting, the Hoonicorn just was faster. And the race team did all these crazy things. They actually they launched the parachute mid track because they wanted more traction. So like
Oh.
normally, you know, so normally you let the chute go because you're trying to slow down.
Yeah.
Well, they needed more weight over the rear wheels. So they actually threw the parachute out at the start of the race just to create more down, like, you know, basically creating downforce. It was
Yeah.
like adding a new wing to the back to try to be able to keep up with the Hoonicorn. I don't know. It was just one of those most like ridiculous, you know, kind of episodes where in the world would you ever see that matchup? And that's so much like why we built that show. And then I always love a really good like underdog win, you know,
Mm.
like a car that you just don't expect to win. And those are usually like, it's like some homegrown car. We raced this Lunch Money was the name of the car, and I think he raced against this like super fast Corvette, and the Corvette looked fast, and the other car was like this old hot rod that this dude, you know, put together in his backyard, and he just smoked him, you know. And
Yeah.
it's like this, and like it's always the one where like the the minute the cars leave the line, everyone just starts screaming because they can't believe that car is winning, or like no one was
Yeah.
expecting that car to be that fast. Yeah. One of the episodes I never went to, it was actually a mini. Forget it had a K engine. I don't even remember, but it was a mini that was just like lightning fast, and no one thought was going to be quick. And like those are my favorite kind of cars. Is the unexpected car that kind of surprises people. So, and that's why we built that show. We built the show for like the upsets. The upsets are always the favorite races. Watching cars you know are going to win. That's not fun. Or
Yeah.
watching two cars and they're basically the same thing. It's like it's not as much fun as getting to like just see that absolutely unexpected one. So
That sounds like all those matchups are wild, but I get the craziness of just two cars you wouldn't expect, and it's like in a drag race you've got this drag car which would be the titan of drag racing out of its depth, and you've got a car that's been brought up to drag racing, and that's a cool thing to go head to head. In fact, it mirrors a lot in the crew, where the crew has these drag cars as well as all these other cars, and the Hoonigan in game, I tried it recently. It's insane. It matches the drag cars in game as well, which is crazy. And I did a whole look at that, taking them to, again, not a drag strip but like an airport strip, and beating drag cars in the Hoonigan.
Oh yeah. And it's crazy because we never intended for that thing to be a drag car. It was never its purpose. It was built to do Gymkhana.
Yeah.
That was its whole thing. And it just happened to be this like weapon of a straight line car. We had no idea. But even in the like Scotto versus Scotto, this versus that that you play in the game, it's kind of interesting because the coupe definitely has way more power than the 911. So like the Audi should beat out the 911, but the 911 is, has a bit better handling, but also has like a higher top speed. So the way that, because it's not just a traditional drag race in Scotto versus Scotto, it has more of like a, more of like a certain or like a hill climb style or kind of like tarmac rally stage kind of vibe to it. I've actually, because I played that a couple times the other day, and I was actually surprised that the 911 like holds its own there. Where you think it's going to be just the coupe would be the one, because just if you just look at the raw numbers, and that for me is quintessential TBT, right? Is that the raw numbers don't mean anything, right? Because there's always like either one, something you're not expecting, a drivetrain that makes the car faster, its ability to get traction, its ability to run on a no prep surface, and then there's the other thing we always call, which is driver mod, which is like you just might be a better driver, right? So
it can come down to that, You mentioned earlier how I believe it was the 911 was sort of it might have been the 911 or the coupe was the start of Hoonigan, really.
So the 911 was the car that we launched the brand on. Ken and I, when we started Hoonigan, obviously Ken had already done there had already been 3 films that had come out, so Gymkhana 1, 2, and 3. It was already well known. We were already starting to race in the WRC. And to Ken and I, it was really important that like people separated the idea of Hoonigan as just being an extension of like his race team, and that we were going to be doing things beyond. At the time, our sponsorship was with Ford Motor Company, so we were going to be doing things other than Ford. So instead of just showing one of Ken's Ford race cars, we wanted to show something very different. And I'd bought that 911 about a year earlier, and in my previous life as a automotive journalist, we were one of the first people, to talk to the guys or talk to Nakai from Raw Welt and go expose those cars, especially to an American audience, like all the RWB cars. So Ken and I started chatting, and Ken was like, man, what if we built an RWB and, and really had like the first RWB in the United States, and really kind of kicked it off with that car. And it's so different from what he was doing in the world of rally and everything else. And culturally, I mean, nowadays in car culture, like, everyone knows what an RWB is, but in 2010, that wasn't true at all. So we thought it was something new, and I knew the guys from Rowell, Nakai and Toshi, so I reached out to them, and they said, actually, we want to launch in the US, anyway, so maybe we can put this whole thing together. So we ended up working with them, and my car and my friend Mark's car were the first 2 ever built in the US, and we launched them at SEMA, and we used that car as sort of like a vessel to really just kind of like be like, hey, there's this new brand that we're doing, and it's Ken Block, the rally car driver, and me, from the magazine side. I'd ran a magazine called 0 to 60 in the US. That was kind of it was small, but it was like a well-loved mag because it was all about just like enthusiast-driven kind of side of cars. And that was it. And we so that became just this iconic part of Hoonigan, right? Like all of the original, like newspaper clip or magazine clippings, I would say at the time, were like pictures of that car being like, new motorsports brand. And at the time, Hoonigan, just even like what Hoonigan was, people didn't really even understand it because it was the early idea of like an automotive lifestyle brand. That wasn't really something that was normal then. So yeah, and that car was a big part of it. So it'll always be like that iconic element. It's one of the reasons why I haven't changed the car much since I bought it, or since we did the RWB. We did change the wheels out, and in the game, when I saw the original mock-ups, it felt so not like the original iconic car that we actually had the wheels painted red in the game, and they're still gold and like polished in real life, and I'm about to go get them painted red. So this was one of those weird ones where life imitates art instead of the other way around, because I just like when I saw them I was like, I don't want them to be like that forever in the game, because like I really want them to be red. So last night while we were playing, I was like, damn it, look, those wheels look really good in red. I can't wait to paint them red again. So yeah.
So that is kind of cool that you made the car in the game, and then the game had them gold, and then you decided that maybe the game's version should be red, and then you made them red. But
because when I saw them when I saw them in the mock-up, because we had to change the wheels out because we changed the suspension, I just was like, it doesn't feel right. I was like, make them red in the game because I don't think I'll keep them gold for a long time. And now it's like the game's been out for just a few weeks or whatever, and I'm already in the process of sending my wheels off to match the game now. So I'm happy I made that executive decision. So.
And now I guess Motorfest has a slight imprint on that that car's changes. Which
exactly.
Of course, the Motorfest also has other things sort of imitated in the game, like Gymkhana, and you've obviously helmed a lot of the process of many Gymkhana episodes. And one of the questions I have is that what would be one of the more hardest scenes you've ever had to make in a Gymkhana episode? I know that's a big thing to run through and think of, but what would you say is one of the hardest ones that comes to mind?
In Gymkhana 9, there was this scene that Ken, actually in a very similar place that I'm standing at now, Ken slides to the edge of a pier and puts one wheel almost off the pier. And it was difficult because we had to sort of like figure out how to get up to it, to approach it, and like we also didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know that like if he went off, would the front two wheels be able to pull the car back onto the pier, or would we go off? So we had to like get the Coast Guard involved, and then also because it's like on the border with Canada, we had to get Homeland Security involved because like we're like so close to the border, we had to deal with that. So we had scuba divers in the water, like all these things to set up for it, and then it just took a lot of attempts to like get us there. Like it was a really hard thing for Ken to kind of like get the confidence to like get up to it and then like go and commit it, and then just getting all the cameras in the place where they were really it was gonna pay off for the shot. That one was a difficult one. And then on the same actual shoot, we did Ken jumps in front of a train, like a moving locomotive. And that one was really difficult because of the timing.
Of course.
Because there were so many variables. Like the train was getting up to speed, so it wasn't running the exact same time every time. And we wanted Ken to jump just in front of it, so he's like sideways in the air right in front of it. And it's all about just like doing the countdown. It was like a long countdown. It was like 23-second countdown. And there's a lot of variables when you count 23 seconds. It's not like 3, 2, 1, go. It's 23, 22, and like getting the cadence done. So it's like a bunch of stuff like that was those ones were really difficult. And actually this last one with Electricana was really difficult because the technology in the car is just so different. Like electric cars just operate so different than you guys would say like a petrol car, an ice car. And that was difficult because it's like figuring out new technology to make it work. And trying to figure those through. So Hey, I've got time for one more question, and I got to go run into another thing they've got going on for me here outside. So, hit me with the best question that you
Oh,
got
good.
to
Okay,
end with.
okay. Quickly, right before the final, the best question. I wanted to just get me just. I'm gonna do my own this versus that in the game. So just list off
Okay,
some cars that you might think would be good together, and I'll pick the two that are actually in the game. So cars you've wanted to put
okay.
together.
Best this versus that in the game. Actually, I kind of want to see Ron's Evo versus my Coupe Quattro
Yeah.
because they're actually like pretty well matched. They're both all-wheel drive. They have similar power. The Evo might be a little bit lighter, and like that's my dude. So like that's gonna happen in real life at some point.
Yeah.
So, but like, so let's see what the game sets, and then from there we'll test it in real life and see who wins.
There you
So
go. Okay, I will
yeah.
absolutely be doing that. And I suppose there's just the future of Hoonigan. What do we see from Hoonigan now, I suppose?
It's interesting. Hoonigan it's been many different things over the past technically we say it's been 12 years, but it's really been 13 years because we started the company like a kind of a year before
Yeah.
we really officially launched it. And we didn't start doing YouTube stuff till 2016.
Yeah.
So the brand had an entirely different life for the first 5 years. And I think now it's like we're sort of moving into a new chapter at Hoonigan and where Hoonigan goes from here. And I think you're going to see, without giving away too much, you're going to see a lot more events and real life IRL type stuff. We
Yeah.
really kind of enjoy that space. We did a lot with SEMA Fest this year, taking everything that we built in the content world and putting it in different platforms, right? I mean, even what we're
Of
doing with
course.
the crew is a good example of that, right? Like taking the world that we created in YouTube and putting it in other ways for people to enjoy, whether it's digitally in the gaming space or it's an IRL experience that you get to come to as part of a music festival. That I think is the most exciting part of what we'll be doing different. Like we're going to continue to do the Gymkhana films. We're going to continue to make this versus that. Like all of that stuff's going to stay. But in terms of what's new and what's different, is really kind of building more into that real life experience. So
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I
thanks, Sid.
definitely look forward to seeing all the stuff that comes from Hoonigan and playing stuff in the game.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's been an absolute honor talking to you, and I won't keep you for too long. Feel
Thanks,
free to
bud.
run. All right.
All right. Appreciate it.
Okay.
See
Yeah.
you, bud.
Bye bye.